episode is brought to you by Promensal.
There's 5 standards of menopause friendly accreditation. Again, they've been based on research of what we know helps in the workplace. So those standards are culture, working environment, training, engagement and communications, and policy or guidance.
Hello and welcome to Thriving in Menopause, brought to you by Prevention Australia. I'm Zoe Meunier, editor of Prevention, and this is the podcast that helps you navigate midlife with knowledge, confidence and ease. Today we're turning our attention to the workplace because while menopause is something every woman experiences, the support we receive at work can make an enormous difference to our well-being, confidence and even career longevity. Joining me today is Grace Molloy, the CEO of Menopause Friendly Australia, an organisation dedicated to helping employers create environments where women feel understood, supported and able to thrive. If you're an employer, HR leader or business owner and you're wondering where to start or what a menopause-friendly workplace actually looks like, this conversation is for you. And if you're a perimenopausal or menopausal woman who wants to continue flourishing in a working environment, this conversation is for you too. Grace, thank you so much for being with us here on the podcast today.
Thank you for inviting me and thanks for raising awareness for menopause in the workplace.
Absolutely. It's such a huge and important topic. Now, for listeners who might not be familiar, can you explain what Menopause Friendly Australia is and what inspired its creation?
Sure. So a few years ago when I was in my own perimenopause journey, trying to find information and seek help through the fog, I realised that there was very little knowledge and information out there. So I started thinking about how to get information to women where we are. And 80% of us are in the workforce. So me in my late 30s, I wouldn't have gone looking for information on peri or menopause to help me through my journey. So we really need to kind of intervene with a bit of a flag in women's faces, particularly in the workplace, and say, listen, this is what menopause is, this is what perimenopause is, these are potentially some of the symptoms you might experience, and this is how you can have a better time through it. So the workplace seems like such a great place to do that. As I say, 80% of us are going to be in work through our menopause transition. And those symptoms are also going to impact on workplaces and on productivity. And we really want to make sure that we're providing holistic care to people in the workplace as well as outside of it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because, you often think of people knowing that they're in perimenopause, but so often the case, when these symptoms start sneaking up on us, most of us aren't even aware of actually what's happening.
Yeah, well, I went on a bit of a fact-finding mission when I thought about bringing information to people in the workplace and actually discovered the UK have been talking about menopause in the workplace for over a decade.
Right. So we're a bit behind there, aren't we then?
We are. And that's a great thing about bringing Menopause Friendly to Australia is that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can use what we know works in the workplace based on research and evidence. And that's what Menopause Friendly Australia does, is bring that methodology that's been developed over at least a decade to employers so that when employers are bringing in support, looking at initiatives and policy, that they can see that what the methodology is, it does work and gives them a bit of a roadmap to help them to really implement that successful initiative.
Absolutely. So what does it actually mean to be a menopause-friendly accredited workplace and what's involved in the process?
So there's now 7 accredited workplaces in Australia. Really exciting. We've just had another 3 accredited. So there's 5 standards of menopause-friendly accreditation. Again, they've been based on research of what we know helps in the workplace. So those standards are culture, working environment, training, engagement and communications, and policy or guidance. And so Menopause Friendly is a membership organisation. So organisations can join Menopause Friendly and we'll help you to work towards those standards of accreditation. So we don't come in at the end when you've, tried to navigate this policy writing and training yourself. We really want to come in at the start to help you to navigate some of these changes, to make them really genuine and to make sure that they're unique to each individual workplace. So the accreditation itself is actually a global accreditation now.
Right.
It's available here in the US and the UK. And very excitingly as well, we've just had Bristol Myers Squibb be accredited in the UK and Australia. And the accreditation itself is really robust because we use an independent panel of experts to assess workplaces against those standards.
Right.
So again, it's not a tick box exercise.
Yeah.
It's not us marking our own homework. We
Yeah.
have those experts.
You
that
can't just fake it and then
Exactly
get that
right.
get that logo.
Yes, that's right.
So since the launch, how have you seen the conversation around menopause in workplaces evolve?
It has been an explosion in the last 2 years, I must say. So we launched the Menopause Friendly Accreditation in October in 2023, and around then was when the Senate inquiry was announced into menopause. I attended the first ever roundtable in Canberra in March of that same year, and that was the first time menopause had even been spoken about in Canberra in Parliament House. So
Wow.
we've had a significant amount of progress since then, which has really been because of that Senate inquiry. And it really spotlighted that it's difficult for people to find information. Doctors don't have great training. Our system's not well set up for menopausal consultations. And particularly in the workplace, we've got a lot of work to do to make sure that employers understand what their responsibilities are in looking after people through all stages of their transition in menopause, but also in menstrual health as well. So that Senate inquiry has been really informative. We've seen announcements from the government, so $574 million, which has been dedicated to women's health. So that's fantastic. And just this week, we had the announcement of a tender for the writing of clinical guidelines on the management of menopause in Australia. So right now, if you go to your GP, that GP does not have clinical guidelines on how they should manage you through menopause like we do in other areas of health. So that's, again, going to be another step forward in helping us to get better primary care. So when we go to seek help for these symptoms from our GP, we're getting a better outcome and having a better conversation with our practitioners.
It's so exciting. Just how much is happening at the moment is really quite amazing. Now, as you say, you're working very closely with these companies. What kind of feedback have you heard from employees in workplaces that have become accredited about going through that process?
It's been really interesting watching some of the bigger organisations that you would think the ASX 10 companies adopting these, but also some smaller organisations. We're working with lots of local councils and small charity groups as well, so really approachable by each organisation. And as you can imagine, say, for example, what might work in a bank that's got 40,000 staff across the country is going to be different to what, say, an ambulance service might need. So we've really seen organisations that are doing it well is leaning into the experience that people are having in their workplace, asking the existing employees, how much do you know about menopause? How are you being impacted? How's our workplace potentially negatively impacting you through this journey? And how can we better support you as someone that's a valued employee? So we've seen great stories, and I have to say, I have a team of people who run training sessions now across Australia, but I absolutely love still delivering those training sessions because so many people come up afterwards and are so grateful. Particularly women who have maybe been through menopause already and they've worked through it and had very little support. They'll come up and say, I'm so grateful that your organisation exists. Would have been amazing to have you around 15 years ago when I was going through it. But really what we see is really that engagement from people in organisations where they're just so grateful that their employer is considering the needs that they have through this life phase. So it's been, from my perspective, really rewarding.
I can imagine.
And it continues to be, and I think it's just going to continue to grow. And we're really seeing some changes structurally in this space in terms of industrial relations and entitlements that are really lifting the minimum standard when it comes to what employers should be providing in workplaces to help people to feel included and engaged through their menopause journey.
Can you give any examples of an Australian organisation that's particularly done this very well or, done something really special in this area?
Yeah, one of the first organisations that was accredited was actually one of the biggest gold mining companies in the world. It's Anglo Gold Ashanti. So if you can think about gold mine, you've got fly-in, fly-out workers going up onto site. You potentially are digging 2 kilometres underground in dark, hot environment. It's a very transient workforce as well. So if you think about the needs that employment group might have in a traditionally male-dominated workplace as well. And what they did really was they really listened to people who are not going to experience menopause as well. And they asked those people who are potentially managers who are male, How do you feel about us bringing in this initiative? What would help you to lean in to this conversation rather than lean out and say, well, it's not for me as a male in this organisation?
Yeah.
And that listening and that fact-finding mission for them was so informative, because it meant that then when they brought in things like 10 days leave, so they've brought in leave for menopause, menstruation and reproductive health, they had already consulted with those people and got their input and really lent into the conversation so that they could address any negativity before they launched that leave and really get down to the crux of the why. And really one of the best stories we hear as well around male-dominated workplaces is that menopause doesn't just happen to those experiencing it, it also happens to the people around them.
For sure.
So if you're a male who's living with a partner who's having hot flushes and they're up at night with night sweats 5 times a night and they're, having to get up and change the sheets every night as well and change the air conditioning and open the window, they're having a terrible sleep and they're showing up to work, potentially not at their best as well. So really that approach that they took in really engaging and leaning into potentially some of the stereotypes and the negativity that could have really showed itself out, that really helped them to succeed in that conversation. And we also the best part of what we do as well is hearing all these stories of people setting up groups to just talk amongst themselves and share stories and share the experience, because it can really feel quite isolating when you're going through menopause, particularly if you don't know much about it or you think that you're the only one experiencing it. And particularly in workplaces that have a lot of women, having those groups or those support groups, those menopause cafes, sometimes they're called, is so wonderful. And you find that you might meet new people across the organisation that you hadn't met before in completely different roles, but you're brought together by the menopause experience and supporting each other. So that's where we see a lot of change in culture and change in normalising a conversation.
Yeah, and just so great that the policies and the things are being informed by the people themselves, not just some blanket thing that someone over here thinks should be across the board. It's coming from conversations with the people themselves.
And absolutely, I think the best source of information of how to do this is the existing people in your workplace that are going through it. So it just makes so much sense to ask them what would be helpful for you. I actually went to a workplace that was accredited a few months ago. It was Australian Red Cross Lifeblood, and they have a breakout room where anyone can go and just take a moment. So they have bean bags in there and fans and essential oils, a weighted blanket. I didn't want to leave. I thought, this is brilliant, cold drinking water. So just a space. Sometimes that's all you need is just 10 minutes to get away and have a breather and really just come back to yourself, I think. So those sorts of initiatives and little, things like that can really be so helpful in a workplace.
I mean, I guess we should ask, how big is the impact when workplaces don't support women through this stage?
The research shows that it costs organisations significantly. So 1 in 4 women consider leaving work when they're experiencing symptoms of menopause. And there's 1.1 million women in Australia and New Zealand right now experiencing severe symptoms of menopause. So the cost to replace an employee is around $55,000. So, that loss of talent as well is such a loss of organisations, where people are leaving because they feel that they can't cope in the workplace anymore, or they feel insecure or loss of confidence that comes from this as well. So it's really important that we do start addressing it so that people don't feel that they should leave.
Absolutely.
There's more and more research looking at the impact from a workplace perspective, and recently Bank West Curtin Economic Centre released a piece of data around how much it would cost the government to provide 12 days of leave for menopause, menstruation and reproductive health. And importantly, what it did is it looked at what would be the gross cost of providing that leave, but what would be the benefits in reduction in turnover, reduction in absenteeism, reduction in presenteeism. And what it showed was that there was significant net benefit of providing leave. And but overall, they sort of assessed it and said it would cost around $140 per employee per year to provide menopause leave once you take into account those additional benefits. So many employers are looking at that and saying, well, $140 per employee. Yeah. Actually, this is something that we really want to lean into and see whether this is what our employees really want.
Yeah. gosh, it's great when you're able to just actually look at it like that because, often people would just think of that going, oh, no, just can't do it because it's too much.
Yeah.
Actually really appreciating.
Yeah, I think the demographic case is so important too because we have an ageing population in Australia. So we used to call it a population pyramid because there was more people in those younger years, but that population pyramid now looks a bit more like a balloon. So we see that we've got a lot more workers that are in those 40, 50, 60, 70-year-old categories. And, if we don't start adapting workplaces to support people in those life phases, we won't have enough people to work for us. So, it's really important that we're looking at those demographic cases, the business cases, the legal cases. Employers have increased responsibilities around looking after people's mental health at work, around reducing discrimination, and particularly in menopause. Gender and age are protected in terms of discrimination. So workplaces are really not only looking at it from a business lens, but from a legal lens. And also it's the right thing to do.
Wow, yes. There is that as well. Now, are there any common pitfalls or mistakes that some organisations make when they try and implement menopause support?
Yes. Taking a tick box approach.
Right. Yes. The opposite of what you've said that, that some of the good ones are doing.
And look, I think it's really important to note that people who are the ones at the coalface of adopting these initiatives have so many competing priorities. They might be bringing in support for LGBTQI plus colleagues, for neurodiverse colleagues, for people living with disabilities, and all of these are really valid and important things for workplaces to do. So we really want to make it easier for those people to be genuine in their approach, to consult with employees, to adopt policies that are going to be beneficial and to provide training and support. So for those people, the Menopause Friendly membership really helps them because they're busy, they've got lots on their plate.
Yes.
But it also really encourages them to take not a cookie cutter approach, but to take that consultative approach. And really what we want to see is that in organisations, conversations between managers and individuals go really well when there's people wanting to seek adjustments or even just have someone know what they're going through. So I think that's such an important point, is just to make sure that you're not taking a cookie cutter. You're not just downloading a policy template off the website and putting in a policy and maybe giving some leave and that's it. Really encourage employers to listen, to take a temperature check on where people are at in their knowledge and how they're feeling in terms of confidence in talking about this topic. And they can do that really easily through our Menopause Friendly checklist, which is free on our website. So they can download that, fill in that checklist and see where they may be doing well and maybe where they might need to look at some extra initiatives or support.
For sure. I mean, as you said, those conversations between managers and stuff, so important. So what are some of the ways that HR teams or line managers can create a really safe environment for women to speak up about what they need? Because there is still that stigma or that lack of comfortableness with coming forward.
Yeah, look, I look back to 15 years ago when I was doing fertility treatment in the workplace. So I did IVF to have my children, did 3 years of fertility, and I did not tell anyone, not a single soul in my workplace. Because, Zoe, I thought that was a career-limiting move, having a child, So I hid it and I just put up with the symptoms and, had to go off in meeting rooms and have a cry every month when I got the phone call saying I wasn't pregnant. So I understand what it feels like in a workplace where there's not psychological safety and where you feel as though talking about something might mean that you look less desirable as a worker. And really that's what we need to break down and to address, because what we know is if there's not that psychological safety, that's where people leave organisations, that's where people aren't performing at their best, taking more time off, presenteeism. So it is so important and vital that people can be comfortable in these conversations. But that doesn't happen just because we intend to. I want to be menopause friendly. Let's do it.
Exactly.
It really takes a dedicated approach to, first of all, understanding where are we? Are people comfortable or not? So really assessing where you're at so that when you're putting initiative in place, you can measure, have we actually changed this? And the most important thing is education.
Yeah.
like everything, if you understand something, it's so much easier to empathise. Very difficult to empathise with something if you don't even know what it is.
Absolutely.
So awareness from the basic level, but then role-specific training. So just like we did with mental health, we started realising that we should be talking about mental health in the workplace about 15 to 20 years ago. Now we have mental health first aid trainers now in workplaces, and people can access information and help if they don't feel comfortable in the conversation, to give them that confidence when they're talking to people about any topic. So it's exactly the same with menopause, providing that role-specific training to managers, reframing the conversation to a workplace conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
Because what I would talk about with my girlfriends about my menopause experience around the dinner table or out for dinner is a different conversation to the conversation I might have in a workplace. So it's really educating people on what's appropriate in the workplace and how you can access support and information, but also signposting to outside of the organisation for those people who might need medical support or might need help from healthcare practitioners. So it's really, as I say, it's a holistic initiative that needs to be brought in so that we are breaking down some of that stigma and really normalising what should be a normal conversation, because it's going to happen to every one of us born with ovaries.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned before, creating a menopause-friendly workplace, it's not just about policy, it's about culture. So what does real cultural change look like?
It looks like menopause not being an awkward or a difficult conversation at work.
Yeah.
And, what we've seen from the accreditation, and we ask organisations to submit evidence of what they've done across those 5 pillars. And culture is one of those pillars. So organisations must let us know how they've been able to show that their culture has changed around this.
Right.
And what it looks like is people having celebrations of menopause. Menopause Day has just been.
Yeah.
So, having events where people can share their experiences. It looks like leaders stepping up, particularly male leaders, and saying, this is an important issue in our workplace and we want everyone to feel included and heard in the conversation. It looks like those menopause support groups where people can come to work if they're having a terrible day and say, look, I'm having a bit of a shocker. I'm still here. I'm still able to do my job, but, maybe today's not the day I'm going to run through the financial numbers with you,
Yeah.
So it looks like that flexibility and really from a life course perspective, it's going to last 15 to 20 years for many people. So it's so key in the workplace that organisations can make us feel comfortable talking about something that's really normal, and often all we need is a fan or some flexibility or some understanding in the workplace as well.
So what do you think Australia still needs to get right when it comes to supporting women at this stage of life?
We're still navigating this because it's been quite an accelerated conversation.
Yes, for sure.
And when we look in the UK, as I mentioned, it started about a decade ago. There was an inquiry over there that was one of the reasons why people started talking about it too. But here what we're seeing, interestingly, is employers are providing entitlements in many cases. So in Victoria, Queensland and Western Australia, there are public sector awards which now have 5 to 10 or 5 days leave included for employees to access. Now, in most cases, that's for menopause, menstruation and reproductive health, and it's available to any employee. So it's not gender specific. So that's something that's unique to Australia, where organisations in the UK, very few have adopted an entitlement. They've looked at flexible working policies, but very few have adopted an additional entitlement. So I think what we need to do is make sure that when we're bringing in those entitlements or those additional leaves, we're not just bringing them in isolation. So we need to provide that training, because if you think about a manager now who might be a 26-year-old male who's managing a menopausal woman, if you say to that manager, we now give leave for menopause, and then just walk away, how confident are you that that manager is going to be able to have a conversation with someone about what their experience is, about them accessing the leave, if that person wants to have a conversation with them without that proper training around what is menopause, how does it impact people, and what can I do as a manager, not only leave, but also to help support that person when they're at work. So I think it's really important that, yes, whilst we have the spotlight on this conversation, let's make sure that we're doing communications and engagement really well, providing training and looking at how we can break down and normalise this conversation. Because the last thing the menopausal person needs if they're struggling at work is just to be told, go off and deal with it yourself and come back when you're fixed.
Yeah, go away for 10 days.
That's it.
Because menopause doesn't quite work like that.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And over that 15 years, if you think about, even if it was 10 days leave, that might not be sufficient. So I think it's so important as well that people are encouraged to not just put up with symptoms and say, oh, yeah, you're having heavy flooding periods regularly, just take some days off. How about that's not normal. You shouldn't be having such a terrible experience. Go and speak to a doctor about it and here's some support to help you do that. So again, that awareness raising can be really helpful so that people just don't feel like this is not a place for you to talk about menopause. Go off and sort yourself out and come back when you're all fixed.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So true. So have there been any surprises along the way, perhaps, unexpected benefits or ripple effects from introducing menopause support?
Absolutely. I think the male conversation and the leaning in that I've seen from men particularly has been really wonderful. Often now we're having sessions and up to 20 to 30% of participants would be people not experiencing or never experiencing menopause. And I have to say most of the time the people that come up and ask me questions or ask questions of our team afterwards are often the men who are partners of people who might be experiencing menopause or they're managers of people in their team experiencing it. So that curiosity that we're seeing from men around this conversation is really, from my perspective, quite encouraging. And, why shouldn't they? Because this is going to help them not only in their personal lives.
Sometimes it is easier for them to speak to a third party than someone that's going through it and probably it might well be biting their head off.
Exactly. And, one of the biggest questions we get asked from, those male managers is, I think I can spot someone in my team who might be going through this, but they haven't said anything to me. What should I do? And that is so key because we don't want men just going around tapping people on the shoulder and saying, hey, I think you're in menopause.
Exactly.
Here you go. Here's a bunch of support. Because that person might not be, first of all, might not be in menopause.
Your period or something.
Exactly. We don't want those conversations to either be the butt of jokes or to be, that person obviously has great intent. They want to help.
Yeah.
So it's important that we train people on having those conversations, let them know, give them some tools on how to open that conversation in a really subtle way and also direct people to others because some people might not want to talk to their direct manager in the workplace about menopause. They might want to talk to a menopause champion or they might feel more comfortable talking to a female in the workplace. So again, just setting that up for success so that that those people who are leaning in with curiosity are given the tools to help them in those conversations.
For sure. So what's your vision for the future then? I mean, it's such a great, you've hit the ground running, but what would an ideal, truly menopause inclusive Australia look like to you?
I want every employer to be menopause friendly. And we often get asked by small and medium businesses, what can we do? We don't have a huge budget. We don't have HR. They might have 20 employees. And for those employers particularly, it's really about having open conversation and breaking down that stigma and normalising. So I always say I hope in 10 years' time that my organisation doesn't need to exist because we've come in, we've done the work, we've helped organisations set up great structures, we've trained people in workplaces to be able to keep that drumbeat going. Menopause is not a weird thing to talk about. We've got public awareness campaigns happening with the Senate inquiry funding. So, I just want to normalise this conversation so that people don't feel they have to struggle through it in silence, both in the workplace and outside the workplace. And we're getting there. We're seeing we've got over 50 members now who have committed to being menopause friendly, and we're seeing a lot of FOMO. A lot of workplaces saying, okay, that's something that we should really be thinking about because we've got a lot of people in our workplace that might be experiencing it as well. So hopefully in 10 years' time, we've finished with menopause and we're on to the next thing.
Fantastic. Yes, indeed. Well, look, that's all we have time for today, but that was very enlightening. Thank you so much for sharing your time and insights.
Thank you. My pleasure.
I hope today's episode has given you a clear idea of how workplaces can best support women through this important life stage and why it's good not just for individuals but for business and culture as well. If you'd like to learn more about becoming a menopause-friendly workplace, visit menopause-friendlyaustralia.com.au for resources, case studies and information on accreditation. And if you found this episode helpful, don't forget to follow Thriving in Menopause on your favourite podcast app so you never miss an episode. I'm Zoe Meunier. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself and keep thriving.